All right, the gear behind John Mayer's solos, episode 2. Good Love is on the way from the O2 Arena in London during the 2017 Search for Everything World Tour. Now, the Search for Everything Tour is one where it's not quite as universally loved by a lot of Mayer gear fans in terms of the tones John was going for, whether that was because John ditched the two rocks and the dumbles in favor of the PRS JMod amplifiers and the Fender Dual Professional, might have something a little bit to do with it, but there are still a lot of really amazing tones and performances from this era, and I think, there are some really good gems that I want to discuss on the channel and in this series. This is the very first tour I ever saw John Mayer on too, so it's still very special and near to my heart because of that reason. So today we're covering Good Love is on the Way, my favorite John Mayer trio song ever, and one that John performed quite a bit during the Search for Everything tour, but the O2 performance in particular is probably my favorite in terms of what we actually see in terms of the tones and the gear as well. It's really special. So what we're going to do is take a listen to the solo first, and then we're going to discuss all of the gear and some theories behind the tone of the solo and the song in general in this case. I just think that was a killer solo for Good Love is on the Way. It's so good, and the footage from this one too is really crystal clear. It's just a really great performance overall. But the reason why I chose this one specifically to talk about today, and this specific version of Good Love is on the Way from the Search for Everything World Tour, is because during the tour, when it would come to the actual trio part of the evening, what John would do is he would change rigs, and instead of the dual JMod PRS amplifiers and the dual professional, he would run Dumble Steel String Singer 004 and a dual professional. So you'd get a Dumble brought out for the trio part of the evening, which just right there makes everything a little bit more special and does really change the tones that you are hearing between kind of the main line kind of performances of the night and then the trio set list in between during the night. So this specific show here, you have Dumble Steel String Singer 004 into a PRS JMod 212 cabinet, and then the Fender Dual Professional as well. The Dual Professional really was the main amplifier for the Search for Everything World Tour. I know Bob Bradshaw had confirmed a while ago that the Dual Professional actually made up the majority of the stage volume even. So that's kind of majority of what you're actually hearing at all times during the Search for Everything World Tour. But to have it paired with Dumble Steel String Singer 004 was a really cool combination. The thing about this performance too is that this is actually one of those cases where you get to see this specific trio rig at the time, because during the first bit of the tour, this is what John would do. He'd swap out amp rigs, but later on, he stopped doing that, and he just would actually run the JMods and the Dual Professional all night. So for other trio performances, trio set lists during these evenings, during these performances, these shows, you actually just got the same amp rig, so you didn't even get a different rig brought out, which obviously made the night easier for everyone, but it just was cool that John was wanting to be very particular about the sound he was going for the trio set list and actually carried that Dumble with them for like 3 songs a night. It's pretty ridiculous, but it's pretty special in my opinion too. Now, the other thing that makes this specific version of Good Love is on the Way just a little bit more unique is actually the guitar. Now, John here is playing his 1964 Sunburst Stratocaster, the Slow Dancing in a Burning Room guitar, the guitar that he actually used in the studio to record that song. But if you go on YouTube right now and you look up different versions of Good Love is on the Way from the 2017 The Search for Everything tour, John most often is actually playing the black one, not the 64 Strat. So this was a lesser common guitar that you saw John actually using for this song. So it kind of hits on 2 more unique aspects to not only the trio portion of the evening, but the guitar John would use for this specific song. You get the steel string singer and dual professional amp rig from this performance, and then the 64 Stratocaster over the more commonly used Black 1 for Good Love Is On The Way. So something interesting about this performance that I wanted to talk about, and just the fact that this gear combination wasn't quite as commonly seen as other gear combinations kind of more throughout the rest of the tour. Now, when it comes to the pedals, this is where things do get, as they tend to with Mayer's rig, a bit tricky to kind of figure out. Now, John was using his massive spaceship-sized Bradshaw Custom Audio Electronics rig where he had a massive switcher in front of him and then a dry and wet pedal board on either side of him with the actual physical pedals on the board. Good Love Is On The Way, when it comes to the actual tone, this is one that's always been very interesting, in my opinion, to try and actually hear. I'm doing a deep dive, giving you guys a heads up. I still haven't quite finished it yet, but I've been in the process of making a deep dive video into the John Mayer Trio era, and I actually have different clips where I believe John's using no drive pedals at all, just clean amp tone for Good Love Is On The Way, kind of in its earliest kind of inception of what that song became. Then the TS-808, then I think possibly stacking either the Katana into the TS-808 or even the Blues Driver into the TS-808 because it gets even more gainy and more saturated than what we know and what we have clear examples of him using just the Tube Screamer for. And I think it's the same thing here when it comes to this version of Good Love Is On The Way from the 2017 tour. Now, before we get into further details of what I'm actually talking about and the theory behind the tone, let's first run over the pedals that John actually had. Now, John had this massive Bradshaw rig, wet, dry pedal boards on either side in a switching system, so to actually tell what he was using is rather impossible without having, just the clearest shot of what the labels are and then seeing him actually step on everything. But for drive pedals at this point during the Search for Everything tour, John had the TS-10 and the Klon Centaur on the pedal board, and then a third overdrive position that he was rotating pedals in and out of. I made a whole hour and 10-minute long full history and timeline of John's overdrive history kind of in its, complete entirety. So if you guys haven't seen that video, go watch it for more details on the different overdrive pedals John was experimenting at this time. But in May, we know he was using the JHS Charlie Brown version 4 on it. At the time of this show on May 12th, I don't believe he had switched over to the Way Huge Camel Toe yet. So we'd have the JHS Charlie Brown V4 somewhat in the mix here, but the main overdrives were Klon Centaur and Ibanez TS-10. Now, as I mentioned before, kind of this theory of John having, at least in the trio days, 3 almost different tones he would go for with Good Love Is On The Way, depending on the night or kind of as the song aged and grew. The best example of just a straight Tube Screamer sound that we have of John's, especially from this time, is Who Did You Think I Was? That is TS-10. That right there is just that bass tone is TS-10. This is more saturated, a little bit more gain than the Who Did You Think I Was tone. If you listen to Who Did You Think I Was, the performance from the night before at the O2 Arena, and this, they're different. The only difference here is the Black 1 is the different guitar, but otherwise the amp rig is the same and the pedals that John could be using is the exact same. It's the same venue even. So it gives you a pretty good indication of what differences in tones we're actually hearing between these two performances. So I'll play for you guys Who Did You Think I Was from the O2 on May 11th, then the intro of Good Love Is On The Way from May 12th. So I think right there you guys can probably agree with me that the tones are for sure different. And if we know that Who Did You Think I Was, its bass tone is TS-10, there's something else going on here for the bass tone of Good Love Is On The Way. Whether or not that is just as simple as the Keeley Katana boosting the TS10, it's very impossible to say. It could be maybe the Clown Centaur or some volume knob, kind of, you know, tuning it down just a little bit to not go total solo levels in terms of the tone and volume. It's hard to say, but I would bet that it's TS10 at least, and that's what John also has been using for Good Love Is On The Way. It's TS10 is in the mix for sure, but what else he's added onto it, that's kind of hard to say. I don't think it's the JHS Charlie Brown. I feel like that would just be very, you know, just a very gainy, kind of, you know, very big solo tone. So I don't quite think it's that. But something in the mix is what's going on. But when it comes to the solo, because this series is the gear behind John Mayer's solos after all, you have to understand kind of the bass tones before we talk about the solo. In this case, we have to kind of cover everything, and I would rather discuss things more fully than, you know, leave a lot of details out. But before the solo starts, you see John step on one switch on the floorboard in front of him on the controller, and then he goes to the MXR Custom Audio Electronics wah pedal. The whole rig was very, you know, Bob Bradshaw inspired and had his kind of, you know, put his spin on everything. So you had a MXR Custom Audio Electronics line driver in the mix, the Custom Audio Electronics MXR wah pedal, which is what you're hearing for the solo, and of course everything else as well was Custom Audio Electronics. But what does he step on when it comes to that switch? This is where the theories are really, like, endless, in all honesty. Could it have been John was switching off one of the Bricasti Reverb M7 rack units that he had, and maybe he just was, you know, adjusting something like that? Was he adding the Katana onto the combination of TS10 and Clown Centaur already before then going to the wah pedal? Was he adding some sort of light modulation? It's very difficult to say. The one thing, though, that we do know is as the solo ends, he steps off the wah pedal and he doesn't re-hit that switch. He just keeps going. So now it's kind of like, okay, can we listen to the beginning kind of tone? Or like the chorus tone before the solo and then the chorus tone after? Is there any difference in tones there? Now, it's very hard to actually tell just based off of unprofessionally captured audio from someone's camera that's then been uploaded through YouTube. To me, it does seem like there may be something a little bit more going on for that last chorus, but it's so hard to tell, and at that point, you know, maybe your head's kind of playing into things a little bit, but it sounds like there's maybe something a little bit more in terms of the tone and volume, just a bit for that last chorus. One other thing about this whole performance that's worth touching on is that as the last chorus ends, John does step on another switch on the controller, and then things do get really loud at that point, and then he kind of does the outro for the song. So gives you an indication there's certainly some sort of gain stacking going on. I'm positive of that just based off of, we know what the TS10, straight TS10 tone sounds like. The night before, same venue, exact same rig essentially. Then Good Love Is On The Way. You know there's something else added on top of everything. And then the solo, you know, I'm not sure what's going on in terms of kind of that, unfortunately, like what he's doing, but I'm just pointing it out to you guys. And that's what's kind of fun about this series, is that I'm not going to be able to tell you guys absolutely everything for fact. I'm not going to be able to be like, yeah, John's doing this, then he's doing that, then he's doing this. It's fun just to discuss it and highlight and kind of throw some ideas out there, and just, you know, maybe even give you guys a bit of an indication of how I approach trying to figure out what John's using in some performances and all the footage I watch to try and make videos for you guys. It's not quite as black and white as it might, maybe it seems, I don't know, in some of the videos I make, but this is kind of how I at least try and approach things, is, you know, make educated guesses based on what we know and then build from there. So I'm guessing, to kind of recap everything off here, the base tone of Good Love Is on the Way is the TS10 with something else added onto it. What that is, we don't know for certainty. John steps on something before using the MXR Custom Audio Electronics wah pedal for the solo, leaves it on, then steps on something else with the outro. Now, with this floorboard switcher, I assume it could have been set up as well for if John steps on one kind of drive pedal combination and then steps on another or a different preset, it switches it. So it could be as simple as the first preset being TS10 and Keeley Katana, let's say, for example, for the bass tone, just hypothetically speaking, for the bass tone of Good Love Is on the Way. John then steps on a lead switch, which then changes it to TS10 and Katana, or sorry, TS10 and Klon Centaur for the solo with the MXR wah. Then, for the outro solo, stacks on the other switch, which then is Keeley Katana, Klon Centaur, and TS10. You see what I'm saying there? It could be something as simple as even just changing combinations in presets. So even then, it kind of makes things a little bit more difficult to tell, but kind of what I just kind of listed out there to you guys might be what's going on, and that probably would be my leading theory and what I'd probably bet on if I had to for this. So hopefully you guys are still enjoying this series. Episode 2 is now done, and hopefully you guys are liking some more of these theoretical kind of scenarios like this one here, where, like I said, I don't know for certainty what John's using, but it's just fun to talk about, fun to highlight a performance and solo for you guys and just discuss it and talk about it. And I don't know, it feels new, and just kind of breathing some different life into the channel this way by just having some more fun and making more discussional videos with you guys. So if you guys did like this video, please let me know in the comments down below. If you guys do like this series, let me know as well, because then I'll, you know, obviously keep this thing going. And until the next one, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.